quick introduction to Kristen herself. She is the founder and CEO of Highliner Technology. So she's worked with Monzo, Sonantic, Cisco Meraki, and other businesses, and focusing on as they scale and build their business. I can talk more, but I feel like Kristen will do a better job in introducing what her and her team and their impact to these startups would be. So without taking any more time, I would love to welcome Kristen. It's all yours now.
Thanks, Jovi, and thanks for having me. Yes, great introduction. I'm Kristen. My background is in operations and always has been. And when I say operations, we're thinking about internal operations. So how companies grow and how they continue to work together effectively and efficiently as you scale. And we think of operations very much as where people meet systems and process. So it's not just about the system and process side, it's about teams and how you build structures across your organization to help your teams be as effective as possible. So today, there are a lot of slides. I promise we aren't going to go through all of them. What I really like to do is to make sure that I'm an ops person, so very practical side of things. So we want to make sure that we're walking away both with like some frameworks and concepts, but then also some templates and practical things that you can put to use or share with other members of your team. And help them put it into practice. So some things will just whiz by because there are things for you to take away, but some things will go into more detail. And today we are very much focusing on using case studies from other scaling organizations to help us think about operational efficiency. So we are going to be thinking about efficiency and how you do that through focus and how you do that through your planning process and your execution and cadence. We're going to think about efficiency in terms of teams. So people asked a lot previously in terms of how do they make their teams more effective? So what mechanisms, tools, cadence you can use to help you do that. And I know this is a hot topic on everyone's minds to think about, like, what can we automate and how can we automate it? So we're going to spend some time digging into that and thinking about that side of things. So it's going to be like that order. We're going to think about focus and alignment, and we're going to look at a company that I've worked with that was really worried about losing their innovation. So created kind of a lack of focus and the challenges they had with that and how we fixed them. Then we're going to talk about another company going through what I call the adolescent years. So this is like 50 into 500, that really like rapid scale, lots more people phase, and what we did to help them. And then on the automation side, instead of looking at a case study, we're just going to look at kind of tips and tools so we can get the most in there. Before we do that, I would love to hear, it's a small enough group that I would love to hear from all of you in terms of who you are, what your company is, and roughly like where are you in your journey of size and scaling. So Jamie, you're at the top of my screen, so I'm calling on you first.
Sure. So in terms of team size, we're 20 people.
Great.
In terms of revenue, we're like 2.2 million ARR. Sorry, what was the rest of the question?
Just what do you do? What kind of company do you run?
So we're a SaaS business. We make software for B2B SaaS software for high risk industries.
Great.
So construction, oil and gas, renewables.
Nice. Okay, good. Oren, how about you?
Hey guys, sorry again. I have to keep on mute because my kids, and it's a bad time of day.
I get it.
Hey Jamie, nice to see you, man.
Hey Oren.
Cool. So my company is GWork, and it's a performance platform that allows organizations to improve through behavior, habits, and exercises on how each person's showing up at work.
Nice. Ooh, that's... Go ahead, Oren, sorry.
We got 10 employees.
Great. Well, I'm going to look that up. I want to learn more. Okay, Rami, if you can, I know you were having more situational.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I can provide all the information that David would be able to provide you, but basically it's a social media software company. Yeah, so they have their own software for social media management, I would say, in my own words. Any numbers, figures about the company? Sorry, I cannot provide. I don't
worry.
have them in detail, so I don't
Don't
want
worry
to give any wrong information. Yeah.
No problem. It's just to get a sense of where people are. Okay, Jan.
Hi, Jan Skålen from Dictective. Yeah, we've been doing it for a long time, but we finished with our finished tool this summer. So we're not an MVP anymore. So we're just starting scaling and growing. So we
Great.
have 6 people now.
Cool. Great. Jenny?
So we're very early stage, so it's just myself and the company so far, all bootstrapped, and a new platform that serves the SME market. So we do payments, appointments, events, and subscriptions for small business, and almost like they can just develop their own web page, like a mini Shopify with a lower price tag.
Nice. Cool. Chris?
Hey. Yeah, we're 50 people, fully remote company. It's a SaaS writing assistant for business and creative storytellers to help people tell their stories and share their knowledge and ideas.
Nice. Brett, how about you?
We're Training Layers is a B2B SaaS onboard engagement and user training through the entire user journey. We got 11 people on the team and just starting to grow.
Great. Joseph?
Yeah, hi everybody. Yeah, Joseph from Blinkian. We are hopefully soon kind of more an AI company, not a classical SaaS company. Why? We received some funding from the European Union, which allows us now to play around a little bit with our business model and as well with the core what we do. So moving away from a B2B classical SaaS company towards maybe an AI-driven consumer application. Let's see what time will bring. Let's see. But yeah.
Oh, that's a big change.
Yeah,
okay,
kind
exciting
of.
stuff. So it seems like kind of journey-wise, you're all in earlier side of scaling. So like really sorting some core areas out, but also kind of all starting to make your way towards that inflection point of rapid growth. And head through. So hopefully this will be quite practical and helpful. We did introductions, but I just want to draw one last thing out, which is how we think of operations. And I think operations is one of those amorphous, could be anything terms. And there's so much that fits in with it. And I found this when I was a COO as well. I've been a COO a couple of times. The role is probably the most amorphous exec role there is, because it's really about fitting into the organization. But one of the ways we like to conceptualize and break down operations back to like people, meeting, systems, and process. So we think of operations in these different areas that all come together. And those are thinking about roles and responsibilities, the cadence of the business, the mechanisms and shared language. So these are the more informal habits of the business, the systems and processes, and the source of truth and tools. So throughout the case studies, we're going to talk through these different elements of enablement and how we use them to help solve some of the challenges they were facing. But I think it's a useful framework as you think of operations in your business in general. Don't just think, this is like my personal COO plea to everyone, don't just think of the systems and process, and certainly don't just think of the tools. It's about bringing all of these pieces together to help your business run as effectively as possible. So we'll get into the first company. So this is what I like to call bureaucracy kills innovation. They definitely felt strongly about this. And I was constantly saying, so does chaos. So this is an organization. This is a metaphorical representation of the organization. This is not really what their employees look like. But they were a SaaS company. They had been going for several years, quite a technical company. So they had spent several years developing their core tech. And then they had done some small angel fundraisers, and they had gone through a quite substantial 70 million growth raise. So they had that strong product market fit in place, and they were really thinking about scaling. And the CEO definitely would describe the team this way. So like elite, like really strong, really like, if you think of them on the starting line, this is what you would think of. And then he always said, or I said, talking to him, is like, oh, it must feel like you're describing like you're standing on the starting line and you fired the gun to start the race for your team. And this is the team you have, but the race has ended up looking pretty different as it loads. This is what the race ended up looking like. And I love this. I've been at my kids' sports day recently, or towards the end of the year. Like, if you've ever been to one, you can relate to this. Like, kids falling down, kids running in the wrong direction, kid just like tying their shoe on the sidelines. Every single kid doing something slightly different. And it was kind of we were a bit baffled, like, because actually it wasn't just his perception. He did have a team of stars. He had great people in his team. He did have those, like the first picture, those elite athletes, but the company was behaving like this. And that fundamentally, to me, is the first tenet of operational efficiency, which is alignment. Everyone was doing different things, and no one knew quite what the right things to do were. So actually, everyone was working pretty hard, but not at the right things. And they very classically, they felt innovation came from being close to their customers, being close to their users. Of course it does. But what was happening at this stage is every time, because it had worked previously, every time a new customer or a potential new customer came along, they'd change their roadmap. So they'd chop and change, and they'd be like, we're going here, now we're going here. And the team was constantly confused, and the team was scaling. So they were adding more and more people to this group without clarity of direction. So for me, the biggest thing to create operational efficiency is actually to create alignment in the organization. Help people understand the direction that we're headed. And so for them, we did this in two really big ways. So one, we focused around roles and responsibilities, and that was particularly in two ways. One, at the leadership level. So what is each leadership team member's actual role and responsibilities? This was not writing their JDs. This was like bullet points and conversations about what they were, and then gates and stages at which we were going to change it. Like, so for the next 6 months, this leader is going to lead these types of things. And then in 6 months, we're going to evaluate that. So flexible roles and responsibilities, but calling them out. We used RACI, which is a really like old school, but I find quite useful tool around responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. We didn't start putting in huge matrices across the organization for every task they had, but we started using this as shared language. But the other biggest thing we did, I think, was changing their cadence up and setting a new type of cadence. So they were very anti a annual planning cadence where you have like one set strategy and execute for the year, as they should be. Like, they were like, how we are a fundamentally innovative organization. How can we do that? Nothing. What's the point? And I wonder if any of you have ever said this or heard this, like, what's the point of writing a plan? Because it's going to be irrelevant in a month. Everything's changing so fast in this org, the plan's going to be irrelevant in a month. So what we were doing is saying, yeah, the plan will change, but the plan actually serves, and the cadence by which we're going to use serves as a treasure map. It's a map for the organization. It's not set in stone. We don't know exactly where we're going to find buried treasure, but we do have a good sense, like, we're going to go by a forest, and then we're going to evaluate our route after the forest. And then we think we're going to have to go through an island. So it's not a like final sat nav, turn left here, turn right here. That wouldn't have been the right kind of plan for them. But having no plan at all and no cadence by which we looked at the planning gave people no clarity about where they needed to go. So I want to share with you what we mean by cadence, and then the cadence we set up for them. So has anyone heard the term cadence before? Is this something that people, yeah, okay. So it's not totally unfamiliar. Cadence is just the rate at which you do things. But for us, it's also the rate at which you do things and the things that you're doing at each phase. So David Sachs, who some people might know, he is a venture capitalist out in San Francisco. He's on that really popular podcast, All In. He's quite opinionated, certainly don't agree with everything he thinks, but has done some great stuff around cadence. And he kind of has set the standard for a SaaS business cadence. These are for larger organizations. So the cadence he talks about is and I've linked to the article about it that he wrote for it, but where you align, everyone's running a quarterly cadence, but you're aligning your sales and finance cadence together, and you're aligning your product and marketing cadence, and you're basically offsetting them. so that major events aren't happening at the same time. So for them, this is a post-product market fit, I would say, SaaS company, where you're running a quarterly cadence for your sales team, which is like sales kickoff, clear territories, clear sales plan, clear commission plan. And he does this is odd. He starts the year in February because, and I don't know if you guys do this too, because a lot of buyers know that everyone's trying to close year end at the end of December. So they'll push you harder for discounts. So his theory is you close your year end of January. So you're not, so you don't end up in that trap. But that's why it's an offset. So basically you start with sales kickoff. Second month, your sales team's selling, but your leadership is focused on the pipeline inspection. And then the last month is just your sales team should be closing. And then closes, your board meetings align to the end of each quarter. So you close, you have for members, that's what you're focusing on with the board. Separately though, your product team is running on a set of sprints, as we're all used to, and their launch event, so new delivery, new features, that's going to be the main focus both for the marketing team and for the product team. The launch events coincide not with your sales kickoff, but a month later during that pipeline inspection, because that phase is when everyone's trying to do deals and sell. So having buzz, having new things come out, that's the right time to do it. And basically, by staggering and aligning these things, you end up with a lot more clarity of where people are in the organization, but also why these deadlines matter and they have to be prioritized. Does anyone run this formal of a cadence in their organization? Nah, yeah, I mean, I don't know. They started so I think like this makes a lot of sense if you have a sales team. When you start to build a sales team that I would say like you could start doing it at 5, 10 or more people. So you have a solid size sales team. And I would say you're fundamentally moving away from founder-led sales. But I think most startups, that takes a very long time before we're moving away from like founder-driven sales, particularly in SaaS, because we're doing large enterprise deals. So this is like, I think it's a good model to understand because later stage, it actually is a very effective one for running a big sales team and a large project team. So you're running product team, you're running lots of different engineering squads within this. But I think startup wise, it's really tough. So this is what we did for that company that was going through that growth phase. We did make them kicking and screaming, set an annual strategy. And the reason why we did that is we said like, back to like people going in all directions. They had created a challenge where only a very few number of people knew what the priorities were. And they were bringing in new hires so fast that people like, they just weren't getting that information. So we said, look, we know it's going to change, but this is where you need to set your big goals for the company and your treasure map. And you need to communicate to the company that it's going to change, but we have this as a tool to help us communicate that change. Your planning is just as effective as a tool for sharing change as a tool for sharing exactly what to do, because it shows people where things have gone off. We did put in a quarterly review process for them against their metrics. And then we did put down a more monthly, like leading indicator target tracking process for them to help them with prioritization and help them change that treasure map as they needed. But I think the more important thing we did for them is they were very, very worried about losing that innovation and losing that flexibility towards customers. But we needed to have, so we need to keep the innovation, but we need to build more efficiency because ultimately we had a lot of new hires who weren't actually doing anything. So we were wasting a ton of runway on people not executing because they didn't have the right space to. So we did have this like overlaid formal sales process going to varying degrees, but we did have like a formalized sales cycle for the sales team because they had more clear set targets. Then what we did is we split the teams up. So basically we created cross-functional teams. Previously, it was the exact same people in the organization that were basically acted as sales engineering to customers and customer support and onboarding for new customers, plus ran the core infrastructure and the core project, plus would chop and change and do new things per each customer. So it's only 10 to 15 people in the org that would do all of those roles. They were hiring these other functions, but no one was taking that on because those 10 people, as you can, 10, 15 people were too busy and overwhelmed to actually build up those teams effectively. So we said, look, we're going to like slow down to go faster. And we are going to build up these teams, and we're going to build up these teams to do different things. It doesn't mean that an engineer would forever stay just in core product or just in prototyping or just on sales support and onboarding initial customer success. The teams and squads changed around over time, and they were cross-functional, so they could. But during these periods, you stayed in that group. So for a quarter, you were focused, at least. So, and it depends on the person, they moved around, but quarter by quarter, you focused in one of these areas. Then we had a much faster cadence going every 2 weeks, just a sprint cadence that could move and change based on user feedback. Then at quarter, and they would do prototyping, they do lots of MVPing, and then they would, anything that would like be able to go into production would be fed up into the quarterly prioritization. So we ended up, it's trickier in some ways, or it feels trickier when you first set it up, that you're running different teams at different rates. But fundamentally, it doesn't feel that different, because even in the quarterly prioritization, you're still running sprint process. So you're still running an agile sprint process, and you're still iterating and changing throughout it. But you are having one team that's like MVP, prototype, get things in people's hands, get feedback. You have one team or multiple that is focused on like, okay, we said these are our midterm priorities. We are going to stick to them, because the problem was their midterm priorities never got done until something catastrophic happened with the customer. Then they dropped everything else and pulled back into it. And then we're going to have some dedicated people. And we actually built out that team and hired a lot more new people to be on the sales, engineering, CS side, because you didn't need your top engineers doing that, but they were the only people that could do it for a while. So we moved them into that space for a short period, train up new teams, and then they moved back into the other spaces. So I think there's real power in and real efficiency you get from clarity of the rate at which you're moving and the rate at which priorities can change and decisions can get made. I think a lot of founders have a really hard time with this, because they're like, well, what if something happens? What if we just need to drop everything and change? Well, there's still a very clear mechanism in here for that. But what's also nice about this, and you'll see like this little dotted line, like, yeah, sometimes mid-sprint, things would get pulled up and changed. But by having this like treasure map and clarity of where we are headed, they could much more clearly deprioritize. Because previously, all that would happen would be like, we have to all do this thing. And we wouldn't change the deadlines on anything else. We just all do that. And then we're like, oh, those deadlines got lost. And it led to a real lack of accountability. So this helped create structure that then helped create accountability, which then helps lead to a lot more efficiency and execution. So this is my like starting point when I think of operational efficiency. Cadence and clarity around prioritization and planning is always actually your lowest hanging fruit. And we're going to talk about automation. Pre-automation, your lowest hanging fruit to create operational efficiency for scaling is aligning your team and not having people not work on the right things. Do people have any questions on this or feedback like, thanks, but no, like it is too chaotic. There's no chance we'd do that. Or like, oh, we've got this and we run this really specifically already. What do people think? Thoughts or questions on cadence and alignment? Thanks, Art. Got a thumbs up. What do people do now in terms of how they structure things? Because I'm assuming you probably have team meetings already happening. So this is probably another question is like, oh, it seems like a lot of meetings. Well, I would posit, and always in the companies that we're working with, like it is a bunch of meetings. It's no more than are already happening. So this is not like you should overlay this and keep everything you were doing previously. This should overlay existing leadership meetings, existing engineering meetings. So the whole point of this is not to create more, but to make the time that you are spending in meetings as effective as possible and not having any non-effective ones. Great. Yeah, Art. It's like it gives a good space for like, this is how we are going to manage what our users need and not like how we decide when we stop and start and move around for that. Good. Also, you're going to have all these slides. The way I've done these slides, yes, and then adding the 15-minute stand-up. So yes, so I would like the 15-minute stand-up definitely still fits in here and is your execution and your sprints so that like they know what's happening in between. But well, I like all the questions coming in. I'll get to it, Chris, in a second. So you're still doing kind of your same agile process on here, but this is like the prioritization around it. So how do OKRs work with this? So this particular company, we didn't do OKRs with. And the reason was we just thought that was way too big of a jump to go from nothing all the way into OKRs, which is usually actually like my advice to our companies. We do OKRs a lot, but you've had to have already had some sort of strategic prioritization and goal setting process in place, or like it's got to be part of what you do before you jump right into OKRs, because OKRs can get really intense. So the way we do it is, actually, I'm just going to go back. Think of your OKRs here in this like quarterly space at the company level. So your annual level, we'd be setting, we didn't for this company, we do for others. That's where you're setting your company level OKRs. And as you can see, we do this, like they start in November, they end December, so that the company can cascade and do their own and individual ones in January. And then you're evaluating them instead of just evaluating generalized metrics. This is where you're doing your OKR reviews, is in your quarterly basis. And what that looks like here is basically at the end of each quarter, see your like sales quarter has closed. So people are working, you're still like, as you're, no, it's slightly off. So your sales quarter is closing. So this is where you like have the data. This is this month, last month is the end of everyone getting their like OKRs finished up, all their metrics in, that's happening there. And then in your quarterly prioritization, so the core engineering will do their quarterly prioritization. You're also doing your OKRs in that same period. So you're following the same quarterly structure, and that will feed into the prioritization piece. It's just a way of doing the prioritization, and you do it along with your roadmap at the same time. It's how we've typically done it. I like to do it. Interesting. Doing all your OKRs for all the squads. It's very stressful. Yes, I agree. How have other people solved for this, or have other people done this? I find this is a big reason why they don't. Yeah, move to an async method. Different people doing them at different rates. And you can do them at different rates. Like if you were doing this here, there is no reason your sales support, sales engineering, and CS, these are all fundamentally running at different rates. Your like prototyping group also could be staggering their OKRs along that. And I agree, keep your OKRs like Jan's, like as limited as possible. So when you're setting them at the company level, at this I don't know if you can see my mouse. I'm like pointing at things like you can see my fingers, but you can't. Okay, but good, you can see my mouse. So when you set them at the company level, keep them light and small, like don't have too many of them. Truly, it should be about what your top priorities are. And then again, you're reviewing them quarterly, but keeping them reasonable, and then encouraging your teams to keep them not having too many. We moved to North Star OKRs. Yeah, I've seen that many places, and I think that works really well. One of my favorite expressions is priorities is not a plural. Priorities isn't a word. Priority is not a plural. So I think OKRs fundamentally are about helping align that organization to where you're headed. And I think North Star OKRs do that well, but really thinking like, how do we limit these? So yeah, I stole that from one of my friends who's also a COO. Everyone should say it. Priorities is not a word. There is no plural of priority. Okay, so great. So one more, do you have some sort of operational maturity model? Only introduce it. Oh yes, okay. I could talk about OKRs all day. So the one thing I would say about operational maturity level is I put them in organizations with, I mean, we use OKRs and we're a team of 5. So we do that, and I put them in teams of 20, and I put them in at Cisco, where they have a lot of people. That was a rough one. I would highly recommend doing it long before you get to multiple thousands of people. But I would say, I actually think, like, to me, the phases are, don't jump into OKRs the first time you are doing your organizational planning. So you should already have a year or some amount of time where, as a leadership team, you sit down and you say, like, what is the priority of the year? What are our metrics against it? And what are our goals? And you don't need, the first time you do that, I think it's really hard to do that as OKRs the first time. So I like it as, it's more of an iteration of where you are. So I think it's like, if your team is used to focusing on getting clarity and giving clarity, then you can move into the more robust OKR process. Or if you go right into OKRs, do a modified version and keep coming back to, like, what is the purpose? The purpose is here to help us align the team. Because I think, as I've said it already, like, alignment is how you get efficiency in scaling organizations. OKRs are such a useful tool for that, but people can get so stressed out and bogged down by the metrics of it, by the format, that it can cause more challenges than it's worth sometimes. So I would say, like, the maturity level is you're an organization who understands what your priorities are and how you constantly set them as a leadership team. So, cool. Okay, so thanks for all the questions. People can also speak. You can raise your hand and just speak. The chat works, but feel free to jump in. So the next one I want to talk about is this. Okay, that's the company level and the engineering cadence for innovation. But how do we think about, like, the teams, and how do we run teams effectively? And what are some of the most useful things to put in place when you're thinking about efficiency for your teams and how to run it? So we're going to think about, so this is a bootstrap company that we're thinking about. I'm not using names because I can give you more information about the companies if I don't tell you the names, by the way, but I promise I'm not making them up. For this one, I'm thinking of a bootstrap company. First time, majority of the leaders are first time. And actually this company is a bit earlier in its stage. So it's 12 people, but they're doubling in size. They've already hired 12 more that are about to start. And so they're going through that, like, beginning of that growth phase. And for them, the focus is putting in some of these foundations so that they can act efficiently as they go through the next phase, which I like to think of as, like, the adolescence. The startup is like the kid phase, which has all the chaos, but also the excitement of that stage. The adolescent phase is the scaling phase for me. And it does bring to mind, like, some of the pain and challenges, but not all the necessary of the excitement of the kid stage is the adolescent stage. But the beauty of the adolescent phase is, if you get through it effectively, you're like a real human, you're an adult, you're a real company, and you're a much more resilient company. So I see some smiles. People must have kids or teenagers that are smiling about this. So this company, our focus is with them is, like, how do we put things in place to make those, we know it's going to be a painful period. How do we make it a little less painful and more efficient, and again, effective as a team? So for them, we focused on building a single source of truth for the organization, roles and responsibilities around decision-making and decision-making rights. And then, okay, if you set priorities and goals, and this will come back to some of our OKR discussions, you set company level priorities and goals, what do your managers do? Because and how do they then cascade that to their teams? Because I would say one of the things that makes the adolescence phase so painful and so hard is that you go from being a small group of people all together in the same room to a much larger group, people you may not even know most of your team at times. But also on top of that, the focus of everyone's interaction shifts away from the founders and maybe even away from the leadership team. So right now, most of you, from the size of your companies, you are, like, not just the central figure, but the central touch point, I would say, likely for a lot of people in your organization. And as you grow, you still are a central figure, a very central figure, which comes with its own challenges, but you're not the central touch point, and a lot more goes down to the manager level. So for us, it's thinking about, like, how do we help enable our managers to be effective and still scale that organization? So the first thing that we do like to do that we think is really useful is what we call a single source of truth. So this is like a wiki. It's basically the index for the business. And I think of this as a tool that you use as an index for the business. It doesn't mean you're integrating everything within it, but it should signpost where everything is. So as you're bringing on more people at scale, they can see where things are. It helps with your onboarding, but it helps take, the other thing about this challenging phase is you have a lot of strong individual knowledge that needs to become institutional knowledge. And this is kind of the repository in the space. So it's not a intranet where information is just disseminated. It should be like a core hub and working space. And there are a couple different tools. Well, there are many tools you could use for this. 3, I think, that are well known. Like Notion is probably one of the best well known. I'm biased. I do really like Notion. We use Notion. ClickUp, I've used at companies before too. So I think ClickUp's really good if you're very project focused. It's has like, I would say it's like first tasks, secondary wiki, whereas Notion's like first wiki, secondary project management. And then the other one is Confluence. I've again put that in and used that at different companies. If you're already deeply embedded in the Asana stack and like Jira is where everyone is living, that can be useful. I don't think the tool matters which one you use. I think having thought about structuring it to support the business helps in bringing that alignment together for everyone. So that's the first thing we think about is like your central source of tools. The second thing we thought about for them is the informal parts of the business. So the mechanisms, some companies call these rituals. I think rituals sounds a little creepy, so I started calling them mechanisms. This is also, it's totally stolen from Amazon. Amazon has a saying that good intentions don't solve problems, but mechanisms do. So like when they do their retros, you can't end your retro with good intentions. You have to end like, we won't do it that way next time, we'll try harder. You have to end a retro with like an actual solution, something that you're going to put in place to make a change. But I think at the early stage of scaling, thinking about more informal mechanisms. So these are like shared language and can really help managers create consistency across the org. So one mechanism that we put in place for this company was around headspace and capacity. So this was for manager-led meetings. And at every single manager-led meeting, every person in the group, because it's a smaller group now, started with their headspace, and that's kind of open-ended. Like I'm in a focus mood, I'm in a distracted mood. People can share whatever level they want. And then the next one was capacity. So I have capacity. I'm at capacity, but could reprioritize, because no one will ever say they have capacity. But they will say I'm at capacity, but could reprioritize for others' needs, at capacity or over capacity and need support. This is quite similar, like stand-up. I think people do similar things in stand-ups. I think it's really useful to create shared language to do this across the whole company. Another really useful shared language and mechanism to start putting in place is around your comms, like around Slack and such. And how, particularly as founders, how you're interacting with the team. Chris, I love that you do that with your wife. I need to implement this in my house too, and with my child and my husband. There is what I have seen so much with both managers and founders, they put things in Slack like, hey, have you read this article? And they'll put that in. And what will happen is like later in the day, they'll like get to stand up, say they're doing an end of the stand up, and people are like, oh, I didn't accomplish this thing, but I have 5 ideas on that article you sent. And sometimes that's what you want, because it's a really relevant thing. Sometimes it's an article you thought was funny and you were just sharing for a bit of a laugh. But because of the level you're at, people take it and run with it. So I think having mechanisms around like what you need and why you're sharing things can be really useful. And I think helping managers understand that and setting this up company-wide helps make it so that managers I think managers would feel very awkward being sometimes, or some would, being as directive, like I'm sending this thing for feedback, I'm posting this for interest, I'm sending this for this reason. So they're always framing why they're doing something. And this is who's involved, and this is the data I need. But if you set that up as a general habit of how you communicate, it takes the burden off the individual manager style. So set them up with strong source of truth, set them up with like clear, informal habits across the whole business. And then the last thing is have consistency in the management meeting cadence, so the one-to-ones. So what I did here is, because I know people asked about one-to-ones, we're not going to go through this, but I wrote out kind of team meetings, stand-ups, one-to-ones, purpose, and agenda items. Lots of different potential agenda items. This is for you to take away, use with your teams. I think having set structures, again, you're trying to alleviate some of that management headspace burden by setting this up in a consistent way. That, again, helps you create consistency and then more efficiency and alignment there. And that helps you then cascade. So this is one method. I've just compiled a bunch of things. Another one, if you want tools. So I think what's back to like, it's not just about tools, but there are some very cool tools coming out. So this is a early stage startup, and full disclosure, I advise them, so I know them, but they are trying to tackle this problem of how do you get managers to have a more effective cadence, and how do you help streamline that management workload. So they are not just setting up the different meetings that they're running, but they're building in AI suggestions for manager of like, these are the types of questions you should ask. Here's a sample agenda, here's templates. So this is one option. I think there are definitely other companies that do this too. Lattice is another good example where they have some of this built in if you already have it as a tool. I wouldn't put this in place if you have 5 managers in your company. What I would do is give everyone a template in your single source of truth about how you run one-to-ones. I would just set it up there. But as you get bigger in scale, some of these tools can be useful. So they are worthwhile looking at. And then we go back to like, how do we automate? This is essentially helping to automate the workload of your managers. So fundamentally, for this company, the preparation for scale was really about like consolidating of information. So people aren't spending time going to different places. It's about equipping your managers, both in the informal methods and then in how they run their meetings. Questions on this? It may seem slightly like, how is this about efficiency and operational efficiency? But to me, and I think to a lot of people, like, again, some of your low-hanging fruit is going to be around getting your managers to run your teams more effectively. And getting them the information they need. So we're about to I promise we're getting to automation. But before, I do think before we try to automate things, we should think about where is the other operational waste? And that comes from lack of alignment and managers not knowing what they need to do. So, any other questions on that? Anything in the chat? No, our chat group. Okay, cool. So, process automation. So this isn't a case study. This is tips and tools for it. So this is a quote from an original AI person thinking at Seymour Papert about so basically process automation is a bit like attaching a jet engine to an old-fashioned wagon to see if it helps the horses. It probably will frighten the horses and shake the engine, the wagon to pieces. So my first cautionary tale in automation is to think very carefully about what you're automating. Yes, Chris, I love that your friend put a Porsche engine in a Mini. I think that's a true story, and that's nuts, and not a good thing. So when we think about automation and process, so here's how I would go about doing it, and this is how we go about thinking about it with our clients. So the first thing we think about is is this an execution process, or is this a process we're still innovating? So if your customer success process or parts of your customer success process are clear, consistent, they have been for a while, that to me, and you're scaling that's about execution. So you need to do the same thing consistently. However, if your recruitment questioning, your selection process, if you've changed it every single time for every new candidate, you're still innovating that process. And jumping right into automating it, you might not, you'll spend more time automating something that you're about to change. So I think the first piece is being like understanding which parts of your process are worthwhile investing the time to automate and which ones are going to change in a month or 2 months anyways. So the time lost of automating it won't be as worthwhile. That's the first thing you need to do. The second thing you need to do is think about like the problem you're trying to solve, but then break that into workflows. So this is about, you can't automate recruitment. That like is not a thing. That's too big. You need to think about like the problem I'm trying to solve is the amount of time we're losing getting candidates in people's diaries for the 3 different meetings. We always have a 3-step process, and we're losing a lot of time getting people scheduled in that process. So that's your problem. But your workflows are candidates. First workflow is candidate knowing that they're coming to interview and knowing what the 3 steps are. Candidate scheduling the first meeting, candidate scheduling the second, candidate being scheduled into the third. And then the actual like candidate has the information they need to be able to do all those things. Manager has the information they need, and that it actually happens. So what you want to do is really, really think like, what is the step-by-step? And I think all the like founders, particularly who are engineers, are actually quite good at this. You're used to this kind of thinking, but really being like, what are the different workflows? What's the work that's happening? And those are the pieces I'm going to break apart and automate. And part of understanding the work that's happening is understanding the trigger events. So the candidate booking the meeting is a trigger event because it should generate a meeting invite. It should generate an update to your ATS system that is done. It should also generate a set of information going to the manager, what they need to do next. And it should generate information going to the candidate, confirming that they've done that and what they need to do next too. So understanding your trigger points as part of your workflows is then you decide which part of these you're automating and how you do it. The other thing, so that's like how you break it down, or how I think about breaking it down. The other 2 things are things to watch out for as you automate. One, different tools have different pricing models. So you need to think about, is this a like per event pricing model? And what does that mean? And what am I getting myself into? And what am I setting up? And then the other thing is to like document the automation that's happened. So making sure someone's going to build it, there should be pretty established documentation in place about how it was done and what both of the workflow and the trigger events, but then how it's actually been set up. Because inevitably, especially if you're using certain tools, things will break, they need to be fixed. You should have very clear documentation around that in your single source of truth tool, is what I'd recommend. So I've put together a lot of different tools that can be useful for automation. I highly, highly do not recommend you go out and get every single one of these things tomorrow and put them all in place tomorrow. Please, please, please heed my like automate the things that are worthwhile automating, not things that could be neat too. The other thing I would say is when we get to like, there's a lot of very cool, like just automation tools, but a lot of the current, this is a SaaS group, you all know, like there are a lot of good SaaS solutions that exist for different areas. So when we think about revenue ops, so you have like Zendesk on the customer support side, helps with a lot of this. WellXC is, and there are a bunch of these, but this one automates the all the follow-ups over LinkedIn, the touch points. So you're getting to those 8 touch points on LinkedIn. SalesLoft, same thing, but you can do it through multiple, you're setting up the workflow and you're setting up the touch points for your prospects. Gong, probably some of you know, this is like, I think of this as like, it's a bit about automation because you can set up the conversations you want managers to be having. You can track whether that's happening. You can track like what's happening in demos. So again, to me, it's like automation by superpowering your sales management. Caliper, this is like a new one, a data, and I put this in RevOps, although it could go multiple places. And this is about like dashboard automation. So how do you, some of the work around pulling all the data from different places, how do you automate that process? There are multiple people in this space. I've seen a lot of new tools around this. They're one. People ops, your ATS, your applicant tracking system will already have automations in place. I like Team Taylor and Recruiting, but there are a bunch of others. Like, again, it depends on like what you need for the business. Lattice, that is a good tool, similar to what I said about Waggle. Like you can set up some of the meetings and use OKRs there. Team House, another one. This is a startup, again, because there's a lot of new people in this space, and their focus is on automation of all people ops processes, which are notoriously difficult to automate because of the level of permissioning you need. So their focus is on doing that. Product and engineering, their focus is for product managers, helping them automate some of that. GPT, I think probably people are already using, their engineers are already using for code. I think the ones people are most interested in are like these generalized ones. So Zapier is the one we all know. It's like the simple one-off automations. N8N and Make are process automation tools. So you set up the workflow and you set up your trigger points, you connect all your different tools. These both will take investment in terms of learning them and like making sure you spend the time on them, but can be useful. MS Power Automate, I personally have never used because we don't work with the Microsoft stack that much, but I do know people who like it predominantly because they're in the Microsoft stack, and it's already plugged in there. Next Matter is like a next level up from N8N and Make, and it is very much a, like more complex processes, and being able to automate those. And I think these are like ones coming that I wouldn't necessarily spend a ton of time investing in unless it's out of interest, because I think they're changing so rapidly, and I think a lot of startups are iterating on them, that there's going to be more and more custom tools for it. Thanks, Brett. See you later. But AutoGPT, so AutoGPT is not OpenAI's. Basically, people built a bunch of code on top of ChatGPT. And AutoGPT is interesting because you can set it goals and it has recursive task lists. So it can like update the tasks it's doing. I find it super interesting to work with. But again, it's time investment. And then ChatGPT Code Interpreter, I think, again, we'll see more and more. I wouldn't say right now it's useful. I think it goes back into like some of that dashboard automation it can help with quite well. Beyond that, I think there's going to be a lot more things coming out of it that are useful. So that is my whirlwind stop of tools, because I thought it would be helpful to focus on both principles and then tools that you can play around with. Are there any questions people have, or yeah, questions, comments, thoughts on it? No? Good. Okay. I see Jovi's popped in the chat a feedback. Well, please do it. It's really useful to know feedback. The other thing is on the slides that Jovi's going to send out, I am really happy to talk in more detail because I know a lot, like an hour is a bit of a whistle stop on all of these things. And as I said, I could spend all day on OKRs, I could spend all day on automation, spend all day on any of these things. So I'm always happy to talk to founders. Get in touch. Happy to have an informal chat about something specific, happy to have more formal chats, but ultimately, like, do reach out. This is what we think about all day long. And yeah, my biggest takeaway is think about, when you think of operations, think of it as your people, meeting, systems, and process. So when you think about automation, think about how your people, your customers, and your individuals are meeting systems and process. When you think about operational efficiency through alignment, those things. And when we think about operational efficiency through your managers, it's where they're meeting their teams. So that's how I like to frame it. I hope that's helpful. Happy to chat anytime. Chris, yeah, really happy to have more operations. You get to a certain level, it is the thing to think about is execution. Like once you, like the execution will hurt. So how can we make it better? So looking forward to talking more. Great.
Cool. Thank you so much for that, Kristen. And I personally think that was a great workshop for our season finale. So we will be taking a summer break and we'll be back in September. But I think, you know, everyone has, a few people have asked about operations, and those people that didn't come today, I think missed out on a really good workshop. So do, as Kristen said, we love hearing your feedback on that. So do share your thoughts, ideas, how you thought about, what you thought about me, what you thought about Kristen, the workshop itself, any other ideas on how maybe we'll have Kristen back for just OKRs, or just, you know, you never know. But yeah, no, just fill those in so we know. So as I said, we'll be having a short summer break. So no, take your holidays in August and we'll be back in September. But again, thank you so much for joining us today. Really enjoyed it. I know we're super tight on time and really appreciate all the questions as well. And as Kristen said, please feel free to connect with herself. She enjoys this. She enjoys answering all your questions, and 1 hour just isn't enough going through all these kind of operational questions that everybody has. So thanks a lot, everybody. Have a good Wednesday, and I will see you soon. Thanks. Bye.